I'm frankly very disappointed in Tracy's overall skepticism and attitude. I think he fails to appreciate how important it is for UnitedHealthcare to deliver revenue or margin or dividends to their stakeholders and their investors. So I don't want any part of this conversation.
Well, welcome back. I'm going to be audacious and introduce this as the number one anesthesia podcast in the world. Randy Moore, you're back. Good to see you.
Good to be back.
Good to see you, man. And Tracy Young, an established and well-respected voice, also doubling as the Dos Equis advertising man today, looking handsome as always. Tracy, you've been on Anesthesia Deconstructed before. Now we're on About the Rest, which is a podcast about anesthesia, business, performance, and leadership. You check all three. Thank you for being on.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's get right into the docket here, guys. I'm going to share very briefly. The first item on our agenda is anesthesia reimbursement. So I'm going to share a few headlines from the week. This is from May 18th, just last month. All sorts of headlines in reimbursement this past month. This, Brian, is actually from my area in Phoenix, Arizona. The potential fallout in UnitedHealthcare's billing policy when reimbursement ignores risk. And effectively what this is, UnitedHealthcare is now not reimbursing. We've seen this for a long time. Not reimbursing for PS status or ASA status. Oklahoma just passed legislation last month to stop this from happening. You can see it on the screen there. Physical status 3, 4, and 5. It requires payment for these things. This was an Oklahoma Association of CRNAs supported bill as well. We had this issue in Arizona, have some big cost. This is effectively the argument was cost shifting. And finally, Louisiana also passed a reimbursement bill coming at it at a different angle, at the 15% angle. So with all that being said, Tracy, you're well known for your reimbursement expertise. You're well known for your legislative expertise. You know how the sausage is made. What are your thoughts here?
Look, this is all part of a larger trend, right? The commercial insurance industry and even the government payers, they've been devaluing anesthesia services for years. What we're seeing in these more recent trends with the QZ reimbursement cuts, with the physical status modifier cuts, are more creative ways from commercial insurance companies to do what they ultimately want to do, which is to increase their profits, right? They're publicly traded companies. They're driven by profit motive and, right, wrong, or indifferent. That is a very, very high priority for them. So when you're dealing with commercial insurance companies, you have contracts with them. You're in network. They have contracts that they have to follow. They draft those contracts and they put a lot of favorable terms in those contracts for themselves. And a lot of those favorable terms are things like, hey, we can change our policy on reimbursement. And when we change our policy, it doesn't cancel the contract, but it allows them to do things like this to increase their profits without having to renegotiate their contracts. And look, anesthesia is easy to pick on. And I think we could debate this. It's debatable whether or not we're a commodity at this point, whether we're interchangeable.
What is a commodity, just for the sake of the audience?
Yeah, the big thing right now is the oil and gas industry, right? A barrel of oil has shot up to like $106 a barrel. It doesn't matter where that barrel comes from, where it goes to. All the barrels are essentially the same. And the marketplace in healthcare, they're starting to see anesthesia. And I see Randy at the edge of his seat. He wants to argue with me on this. But healthcare and hospitals in general, they're starting to see anesthesia as a commodity, that their parts are interchangeable. And anesthesia groups are interchangeable. Insource, outsource is interchangeable. And they keep making these decisions. They keep changing from one vendor to another, et cetera, et cetera. And commodities are necessary. That's the other important aspect of a commodity. Anesthesia is necessary. Hospitals cannot run their operating rooms without anesthesia. So in a sense that hospitals are willing to subsidize, in other words, pay out of their own pockets to continue to get this commodity above and beyond what commercial insurance payers and government payers are willing to reimburse for the service.
Mm-hmm.
It's helped to commoditize us further, and it's helped to incentivize these payers to say, why do we need to continue to reimburse anesthesia at high rates when hospitals are going to subsidize it and pay the difference? So they keep devaluing our services, propping up their profit margins. And we're kind of stuck in the middle, and we're fighting back a little. But if you take this is a giant elephant, Anesthesia is a gnat on the elephant's rear end, frankly.
I'm frankly very disappointed in Tracy's overall skepticism and attitude. I think he fails to appreciate how important it is for UnitedHealthcare to deliver revenue or margin or dividends to their stakeholders and their investors. So I don't want any part of this conversation.
Better be careful, man. There's Mangionis out there. They're all over Chicago. Be careful.
Obviously, Tracy and I are much more aligned on this than I was signaling. I think if you zoomed out a little bit even more, I think anesthesia is a big, fat, rich target for the UnitedHealthcares and the Aetnas and the Blue Cross Blue Shields of the world for a variety of different reasons. One is they know that there is a financial backstop, which is the hospitals and health systems in the United States. They know that at the end of the day, if they're driving down reimbursement, someone else is going to have to pay for that. It's not going to be
Yeah.
the anesthesia clinicians, and it's not going to be the anesthesia groups that employ anesthesia clinicians. It's all going to be passed through. And which is, one of the more perplexing things of this conversation. It is and it isn't. One is that, the American Hospital Association has been largely kind of on the sidelines. But Tracy's point is well taken, which is, healthcare in the United States is a $4+ trillion business. Anesthesia is maybe a $30 billion piece of that. And we are definitely a gnat, in aggregate, if you compare to the total spend in the United States on healthcare. So all of this is very important to us. It's very important to our clients, very important to the groups that we are either employed by or are managing. But writ large across the ecosystem, most people don't care. And UnitedHealthcare knows that, right? And other commercials know that. They also know that this is where I get myself in trouble sometimes, that the unique nature of advocacy in the anesthesia community with the AANA on one side of the aisle and the ASA on the other side of the aisle with zero coordination, is zero, and these are issues that impact the entire anesthesia community, but the AANA and the ASA still is very much positioned as the Hatfield and McCoys here. And they're not sharing resources. They're not coordinating. They're not collaborating.
If that's the case, we're definitely the people played by Kevin Costner in that classic AMC version of that. I think you're
Yeah.
totally right there. But I want to go back to this commodity thing real quick because, Tracy, to restate your position or characterize your position, anesthesia is a commodity. Why pay high prices for a commodity? Drive the price as low as possible. And Randy and you both effectively said hospitals fill the gap, right? But Randy, you're kind of known for talking about how culture is a different differentiator locally, nationally, so on and so forth. So if I fire North Star and I bring in Napa and this is a commodity and I'm a hospital executive, effectively comparing the management costs and the subsidy costs, et cetera, how do you combat that?
It is by providing a superior product. That's how you differentiate. So there is no, and this is like with COVID, workforce disruption, and with surprise billing and other reimbursement headwinds, anesthesia's moved from you compete on price, meaning your ability to get a higher price, to now that's been largely mitigated, to now you are competing essentially on your ability to recruit and retain CRNAs and anesthesiologists. And if you're effective in doing that, then you're going to differentiate yourself in a market, and that's how you're successful. And there's other things around transparency and obviously providing a great service to the patients and to the surgeons. All of that's important, but differentiation today in our business ecosystem is largely found in your ability to recruit and retain. The best way to do that is to have great leaders, great culture.
100% agree. And look, when I talk about anesthesia being commoditized, I'm thinking as an industry. But then, so that's a market, right? The entire industry is a market. And then we have micro markets inside the industry. So at the hospital level, at the city level, and regional levels, the service you can differentiate even with inside of a commodity through quality, through service. Our organization's growing rapidly. I think we've probably picked up 25 to 30 new facilities in the last 14 to 16 months, hired roughly
Jeez.
300 to 400 anesthesia clinicians. And we're not doing that because we're the lowest priced part of the commodity chain, right? We're doing it through differentiators, through service, through culture. And what Randy mentioned, the most important part, being able to recruit and retain providers. You'd be amazed. Like we go into hospitals, we start day one, they need 14 operating rooms covered. And when we start on day one with 14 anesthetizing locations covered, the surgeons, the hospital administrators, they are like
They're
on cloud
shocked.
nine because the previous group was only sending 6 or 7 a day, and surgeries were lasting all night, being pushed to the next day and the next day and the next day, and they were losing volume to different places. So, while it is a commodity, that's the macro market, right? That's how it's viewed. But on the micro level, the individual hospital, the individual regions, it's there's more differentiators at that point.
Tracy, I didn't mention at the top of the call that you're the incoming president of the AANA, right? I think most listeners of the podcast know what that stands for, the American Association of Nurse Anesthesiology. And Randy, you've spoken about this before. ASA and AANA don't, communicate a lot. I think that's a fair characterization, right? And even look, I learned about this bill. You guys see it on the screen there. I learned about this bill through Jenny Schmidt, who I'm not sure what her official role is. I think it's like the Queen of Oklahoma or something like that. She's done a lot of great work there. She mentioned that they coordinated with the Oklahoma Society of Anesthesiologists, but I noticed conspicuously that there's nothing here about that level of coordination. Randy, do you want to just finish your comment there, and then we'll go to Tracy for your reaction on this newsletter.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. So this is what happens, and we see this in other advocacy related areas. What there isn't a one size fits all approach to solving a really difficult problem, then the states will come at it, right? So we've seen this in Ohio. We're now seeing this in other states where the state associations, whether it's they're doing it in a coordinated way or they're just running at this independently, they are now trying to address these reimbursement issues, these policy decisions. My hypothesis here is like this is what we're going to see. Like we're going to see state by state some legislative action to try to reverse some of these policy decisions, which is going to be very expensive, obviously, and going to take a very, very long time and will not be completely successful. Obviously, the AANA has wanted action from the federal government on this, which would obviate the need from having to do a 50-state strategy, which is essentially what is going to have to happen. And obviously, not all 50 states are going to have the political capital, the financial capital, or just the fire and ability to come after this stuff. So you're going to start to see states where CRNAs are in a very good position from a reimbursement perspective. And you're going to see states where CRNAs are getting screwed. And you're going to see 15, 20, 30% delta between what a CRNA is reimbursed with at QZ versus what an anesthesiologist is reimbursed. So that is the unfortunate, but undoubtedly the direction we're going to be going here, unless there's some kind of Hail Mary intervention by the federal government, which
Well, federal government's known for its efficiency and effectiveness, so I'm sure we're gonna see
yeah,
that. Yeah, at some point, we've got to start laying down arms, so to speak, on these reimbursement issues. Tracy, again, not asking you to speak on behalf of the ANA or anything, but you have a unique view, right? So, can you speak to this from all your different hats? I think this is a question a lot of people are wondering: why aren't we working together more, right? And maybe this is the opening back from Thoughtbridge in the '80s or '90s.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And just to reiterate, these are my viewpoints. These are not the viewpoints of the association, of the American Association of Nurse Anesthesiology, not the viewpoints of the anesthesia management company that I work for. But I can tell you that the ASA and the AANA agree on about 85 to 90% of everything, right? It's that 10 to 15% of things that makes collaboration really, really difficult. And a lot of times when you start with those 10 or 15% of differences, and that's the table stakes that's laid on the ground and saying, hey, until we agree on these things, we can't do anything together. When that is what's led in conversations, the conversations immediately die. And I can tell you historically, and Randy has a viewpoint into this that extends before my years of being involved in the association, that frequently a lot of those conversations start with that. In other words, we know we're never going to agree on these things. However, until we do, we can't work together.
Right.
Is that, Randy, is that your experience as the CEO of the AANA back before I
Yeah,
became
yeah,
involved?
yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. And then it's, not to get us too far into the wilderness on this topic, but I would say it's also a reflection of the governance and leadership of both organizations, right? And
Mhm.
so it's really hard if a lot of the people who make it to the board of directors at the ASA, and I would say to some degree at the AANA, are on the militant end of these 10% issues and are not really attached to the business side or the consequences of what happens when these reimbursement issues play out, then they're going to be focusing on the 10% issues.
You don't want to name names there, Randy? You don't want to name any of the militant people?
I mean, I'm
I'm
not,
just kidding.
no,
I'm just kidding. Just adding a little
yeah,
humor to the
let's keep it
conversation.
theoretical. Yes.
Keep it
Yeah.
theoretical. All right.
In a very weird and nerdy way, this is a governance issue, and not a federal governance issue, not a state governance issue, but a association governance and leadership issue as well.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean the ultimate positioning an organization takes is reflective of its board of directors, right? So the management team of any organization. So I say management team. Think of the CEO and his or her team. They're not setting policy or strategy. The board is. And and if the board is 30%, 50%, 75% focused on the 10% of issues versus the 90% of issues that really drive the day-to-day outcomes, then it's really hard for us and for them to put the baggage in the parking lot and say, let's go focus on the
Something
issues that
productive.
mean the most. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a reflection of how people land on a board of directors. Full stop. It's not a competency-based model. And so it's a model where even today, I mean, people are actively campaigning on Facebook as we speak, which
Hey,
is the worst possible way
hey,
to identify and,
what are you
and, and
doing?
promote leaders. So,
You
so
okay? So for
and the
those who don't
ASA
know,
model is not is, and to be clear, the ASA
any
model is not
better?
much better.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So for those who don't know, like it's funny because we're recording this on May 22nd. It probably won't be released until June. I'm currently in an election. Look, Churchill said democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. So you're right. I think competency based. When you go to a more corporate style of governance, you're hiring people for their skills, background, experience, competence. That works really well. But fundamentally, trade associations are a democratic, e.g., popular mechanism. Generally speaking, there's some ways to disconnect that and disconnect mob rule, right, from governance. It's difficult to do. I think we've made some progress. Tracy, brief comment from you on this, then we'll move on to our next segment.
No, look, I keep going back to the point where both organizations are focused on patient safety, right? We want what's best for the communities and the patients that we serve. We also are focused on making sure that our members are getting the recognition and the knowledge and being able to practice in the way that they're trained and educated to do so. The difference lies in the communication and the understanding that both organizations and both professions, and I'll include the third profession, anesthesiologist assistants, we're all not going anywhere, right? And when we recognize that the reimbursement issues, the patient safety issues, the things that we all agree on, when we can lock arms in those areas, our gnat grows a little bit, right? On this elephant, we become a little bit stronger, we're a little bit more cohesive. But when we focus on our differences and when we focus on the areas where we disagree, right? Because I don't think, I'm going to speak for me personally, right? And probably everyone else on this call, none of us are anti-physician, right? We're just pro CRNA in the advocacy of the things that we want to promote. So we don't want to hurt physicians. We don't want to hurt AAs. They're humans, right? They're just like us. They made a career choice, probably relatively unknowingly, that they're going to be entering this highly politicized career where there's all these competing forces, and where we can lock arms, we should, for the benefit of our members, for the benefit of the communities we serve.
Well, it's well said. We're all in organizations in our professional lives that have MDs and CRNAs. I say it this way: we like to think both and. All right, everybody, that's a good place to stop. We have a brief break. We'll be back. Stick with us. We're going to move to some private equity. Private equity is all over the internet right now. Let's go over some headlines. This is from the Wall Street Journal. New state laws to bar private equity from medicine start to show their teeth. This is from May 15th, 2026. This is from last October. California's Newsom signs bill to curb private equity's role in healthcare. Right up the street, Oregon bill to block private equity medical deals heads to the governor's desk. This is from May last year. This eventually gets signed, culminating in this case here, where Apollo MD, if anybody's watching, I can't say glaucoma, I can never say it properly, the eye doctor who's so popular on social media, he's been all over this. I believe he lives in Oregon, and he's got a unique history. He did have some very interesting commentary on this, and effectively what happened, Apollo MD, large, I presume, private equity group, comes in, the local physicians sued them in part over the fact that they were out of compliance with this recently passed law. And the conclusion of that lawsuit was a private settlement. However, Apollo MD has exited that deal. The local physicians have taken on. 2 more brief slides before I get comments here, just so people know what this actually does, right? In California, it requires disclosure of material transactions effectively, and I'm vastly simplifying it. But if a giant group is coming in, there's some sort of transaction, some sort of merger, some sort of partnership. If it meets certain criteria, they need to tell the government about it, right? So they have insight on what's going on. It doesn't prevent it outright. Oregon was a little bit different and more stringent. I'm more familiar with this law in that it bars MSO or PE control of an anesthesia group, for instance. Notably, when I looked at the language of this bill, because I'm a nerd on these things, CRNAs are not actually named in here, but there's probably some impact. I know Sound recently started up there. So with all that being said, gentlemen, private equity, the government, they're weighing in. Let's start with you, Tracy. I know you have a lot of experience in this area. You've been in the business a long time. You've seen this trend come and go. Why don't we start with you? Thoughts and reactions?
So bashing on private equity is the topic du jour for the last year, and somewhat rightfully so. Right, there's been some bad actors that have done some things that have harmed healthcare. Right, quite frankly, the ironic part is there's also publicly traded companies that have profit motives that are doing similar things and the same things. But the focus is on private equity, and we're a reactive society. We don't pass laws to be proactive, to make sure that well intentions are out there and people are being cared for well. What we do is we see 1 or 2 bad actors and we pass sweeping legislation to try and fix that and curb that. No Surprise Act is a good example of that. Very, very well-intentioned legislation, some pretty harmful unintended consequences around how that reshaped the marketplace in some areas in some ways as well. But what we do here, by being reactive and passing these laws and focusing on a narrow set of players, we're often missing the bigger picture, right? And the bigger picture is how we're delivering healthcare in the United States. The Oregon Act is really about, the Corporate Practice of Medicine Act and these friendly PCs. Friendly PCs are something that anyone in the business in multiple states or in any of the states that have Corporate Practice of Medicine Acts is well aware of. It's a concept that probably 99% of CRNAs and physician anesthesiologists are completely unaware even exist, right? It's a little bit frustrating because private equity is getting a bad name right now. And private equity is not always associated with negative events, negative outcomes. If you recognize private equity for what it is an entity that has a profit motive, just like publicly traded companies and just like privately held companies, right? People that go into business to make a profit because they're accepting a certain amount of risk.
I'm probably closer to the crowd on this, right? I'm pretty, I saw what happened with Red Lobster, right? And I'm a little bit newer in my career. Notice how I didn't say younger.
Is this all about Red Lobster? Is this your
Look,
this is your
Red
back end?
Lobster. It's a perfect example of.
It has nothing to do with Red Lobster being a terrible restaurant chain. This is all about private equity.
Maybe a little.
Okay.
But I think, when people talk about profit motive in healthcare, it's broadly misunderstood. And what I always remind people is individuals, we all have profit motive. And we all know that because we hire individuals and they say, I want to make as much as I can and work as little as I can. And that's a very natural thing. It's okay, right? That's just life. That's profit motive, right? I think what you're describing, Tracy, is where things get really out of balance. So I don't want people to hear that and think all profit is bad, because anyone who says that tends to like to get paid, right? It's the old saying is, the only problem with socialism is when you always run out of other people's money, right? So I'm revealing a very slight, very, very slight political bias there. I'm not a socialist, but I needed to weigh in there. So Tracy, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure your thoughts were not mischaracterized there, and just add that nuance. Please continue, and we'll go to Randy.
No, look, I think that was kind of the end of the frame of reference, right? Even nonprofit organizations quite frequently become bad actors from a financial standpoint,
Yeah,
even though they're nonprofit organizations. So
for
the
sure.
characterization of private equity is based on a handful of bad actors that have done some really bad things, and they really need to be punished. We've just kind of, we react. I'll give you a perfect example, and
Yeah.
this is going to be this is going to be a peek behind the curtain inside the AANA, right? And probably something I shouldn't even say, but look, let's be controversial. When I came on the AANA board, we had a list of policies and procedures that thick of things that you cannot do. And every one that you read through, you think like, oh, I remember when that individual did that. So a policy was created to correct one person's actions from years past, right? And there's like a binder that's that thick of all those things. Like, really, are we policing everything? And that's what we're doing in this reactive legislation as well, too. It's like a couple of bad actors. I say target the bad actors, make an example of them, correct? And the market kind of figures itself out.
Was there a Randy chapter in the AANA policies?
There could be a Randy chapter.
I didn't notice a Randy chapter. I did not notice one of those.
Moving away from maybe Red Lobster biscuits and AANA related
Come on.
issues, I think
Red Lobster is a great example.
there's an inherent tension that's happening within healthcare right now. One is that there's a recognition and a movement towards scale. So that's why you're seeing tons of consolidation. I'm not talking about anesthesia specifically, but across the healthcare ecosystem, tons of consolidation because it works. Scale works when done well.
Tell us why scale works.
There is an efficiency that comes together when you bring multiple organizations or multiple units within an organization, in terms of you can do things more efficiently, you can do things more cost effectively. Think of across the board HR integrations, revenue cycle. Instead of having independent departments or organizations or businesses, if you put them together, like one independent hospital being acquired or integrated within a hospital system, there's a natural efficiency, theoretically. Doesn't always play out that way, that occurs, or at least that's the strategic thesis for consolidation.
Price per unit goes down, right? If you're buying a bunch of t-shirts, you buy 1,000, you get them for 50 cents. You buy 100, you're paying $3 a shirt.
That's the tension, which is healthcare is the big chunks of healthcare are pursuing consolidation, right? And if you look at whether it's the emergency medicine business, whether it's in the anesthesia business, and the anesthesia business still is highly fragmented. There is a directionally moving towards consolidation because there are efficiencies that are achieved with that. And if you look at this organ thing with Peace Health was a absolute debacle. If you did any reading about this, I encourage you, open up a bottle of wine and read some of these articles. It is a playbook of what not to do if you're going to bring in an outside group. They made every mistake possible.
You don't have to speak about Apollo MD if you don't want to, but give me a mistake that they made.
I don't want to speak too bad about Peace Health because we may at some point in time want to have a professional relationship with them. But and I would also say that the individual who was running that on the Peace Health side has been invited not to be in the organization anymore. So
right afterwards, the CEO got fired. It was all in the news.
Yeah. So there was the way that they structured, and this is a little inside baseball, but the way that they structured the entity was so obviously a attempt to circumvent the law and they didn't put a lot of effort into it. It was like the laziest, but messiest approach possible. So there's this is an example of terrible execution, coupled with their, the incumbent emergency medicine group. And I don't know. My hunch is they probably weren't doing an awesome job, in term, at least from a relationship perspective, but cost, coverage, whatever. There was some reason why there are reasons why Peace Health pursued this.
Sure.
And if you ask in a private room, like, what were you unhappy with? You would probably get some pretty compelling concerns. So, because this is what we see on the anesthesia side. So I'm trying to play a little bit of the devil's advocate here.
I appreciate you saying that, actually, because if you listen to Eye Doctor comedian guy, I honestly I don't know his name. He's just really funny. But his content, he would contend effectively that private equity is, again, it's the boogeyman in the room. That's why we're talking about it. Has come and displaced this team of local physicians that has served the community for 50 years, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
if I can characterize your point of view, it's effectively, if any group was doing a great job, generally their job doesn't get shopped. You're not looking to replace them at a fundamental level.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's 90%
from an anesthesia
true.
management group. Randy and our groups don't get invited into hospitals to take over anesthesia departments that are functioning well.
Yes.
By and large, they're usually dumpster fires, or there's issues that are going on with staffing, or there's service to communication, leadership issues. We're never invited well. It's like, everything's going great.
Yes.
Come on in, right? Or the costs are out of control, those types of things. So, while they paint themselves as, serving the community, and they're the saints in this story, right?
Of
and
course.
the big bad corporation is the bad. Hospitals don't change groups and make these major disruptive decisions when things are going well. So there was issues there. I can guarantee you that.
Totally agree. There's this inherent things that my bias is on these kinds of things is pro-competition. So I immediately get nervous when I see things that could potentially limit competition. So if we harken back to the last conversation we had, weirdly, we talked about the FTC's intervention in Texas with USAP. And directionally, I'm supportive of that because, that situation, there was concern about lack of competition in key markets like Austin and Houston, Dallas.
That's why the FTC intervened?
That intervention was predicated on we need to open that up and create competition. Now, we go to Oregon and California. I think these are well-intentioned. My concern is if you're going to over-rotate into highly regulated intervention by a state government, what does that do to competition? And how does that impact cost? How does that impact coverage? And how does that impact quality of care? And so I'm inherently skeptical of any government intervention that is going to decrease competition.
You sure you're from Illinois? You sure? Yeah.
I'm definitely. If you like my politics, I'm not that this is relevant. I'm more left leaning, but there are things around. I just don't like any environment that decreases competition.
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't.
Of course.
Because I think it means that the quality of the product is going to go down, and the cost is going to go up.
There's been such excess, right, in the American economy generally. There's so much wealth concentration. And we're not talking about the 1% or the 0.1%. We're talking about the 0.1%. And things have become out of balance. And I think this is a reaction to it. Some of this reaction is appropriate. These bills, we'll see. We'll see if, things get better or things get less expensive in California and Oregon. I'm going to flip we got 2 more segments. So this was a slide from last week. Someday I'd like to have somebody from the ASA on this show. This is probably not going to win me any favors there. But 95% failure rate over the last 30 years. And you can see a lot in recent years as they've gone up. They've gotten a few through in recent years. Just from the last week to this week, Iowa and Minnesota were just defeated. So for 2026, I have updated numbers. 10 bills were introduced. 6 have failed so far. 4 are still active. I can't say I feel, any of these are likely to pass. We'll see. Randy, what are your thoughts here?
We had a conversation in the past around on advocacy, whether it's at the state and national level. It's so much easier to play defense than it is to play offense. And so you're seeing here just the inherent inertia that's associated with trying to change the status quo. Like in some of these states, there's actually AAs all over Michigan. So this is around professional licensure recognition.
Yeah.
Same thing in Texas. So just to be clear, like there are AAs in Michigan, and even though that the legislation may or may not be
Right.
successful,
They're not recognized, but they're there.
they're not
Yeah.
recognized, but that doesn't have a real material impact on their utilization in Michigan or Texas, right? So as you think about this, this is just like 95% sounds terrible. It's not that bad. If you scale out, if you
It's
look
pretty
across like a
bad.
10-year time,
It's
if you
pretty
look at a
bad.
10-year time horizon, that what does this look from a trending? And also, like if you look at the number of AA programs coming online, the year-over-year graduates, and you look at that at a 10-year time horizon, it is just inherently very difficult to go on offense and be successful.
Yeah, that's fair. But the CRNA associations, and I've been part of some of this, but not part of a lot of it. They've gone on offense quite a bit. I don't know the numbers. That'd be interesting for another episode. They're probably winning more than 5% of the time. I think it's closer to 10 or 20, but even so, that's double. With AA, as I always go back to, we're just asking the wrong question, right? Like number one, this is like, come on, like this is a replacement play. Come up with a profession that doesn't overlap in services as much. It just is what it is. It's okay, right? I think, and I'm going to keep this brief for time. In Arizona, I think the intent was exposed there. I was only a small portion of this, even though I live in Arizona. They put an amendment on the bill so CRNAs could supervise, and they were like, that can never happen. And the response was, well, I thought you wanted to work in this state, and this would open up all these other markets to you where anesthesiologists don't exist. And they're like, well, we can't sign on to that. So if it was really about work, I think they probably would have at least had a conversation. I think we're asking the wrong question. If we're expanding the pipeline, there's 70,000 CRNAs in the country, probably double down on that framework rather than trying to create something new. I think there's a lot better way. If I was advising the American Society of Anesthesiologists, there's a lot better ways to secure your position, advocate for your members, which they should do. That's what we do too, than AA legislation. Tracy?
Agree 100%. And I think we're
Wait. Agree with me or Randy? Just we got to figure out if you're going to come back. So agree with me or Randy.
okay. Let me rephrase that. I disagree with both of you. No, I think we're stemming the tide, right? And we spent enormous resources to kind of slow the growth of the AA movement that the physician anesthesiologists that they've pushed, they've created, as a replacement for CRNAs. That's, you said it, Joe. That's what I agree with. That was the reason why AAs were created. If we look into the future, though, we're going to continue to stem the tide a little bit, but they're going to continue to grow. Their rate of growth is actually faster than ours, and ours is faster than physician anesthesiologists. So project that out into the future, and what are we going to see? We're going to see a lot more AAs. We're going to see a lot more CRNAs. And from a ratio standpoint, we're going to see a lot less physician anesthesiologists. I've written about this numerous times. Randy has talked about it. We're going to see a sorting in the industry where hospitals are going to have to start making decisions, and some already are, but it's going to become a lot more pressing for them to do so in the future, where what are their models going to look like? Are they going to utilize AAs or are they not? Many mixed models don't work very well. When there's 3 providers in a hospital with 3 different titles, 3 different endpoints to getting to their terminal degrees, I think the future is going to look a little bit different, where there's going to be CRNA-centric facilities. They'll have physician anesthesiologist involvement, most likely, but the model is going to be a little more CRNA-centric, right? Where CRNA is practicing to the full scope, physicians are there lending their expertise and their helpful knowledge and their hands and everything else. And then there's going to be the medical directive models, and those are mostly going to be MDs and AAs, in my opinion. And I think the market's going to start sorting in that direction, not because of my preference, but because of the workforce dynamics. There won't be enough anesthesiologists. There's no doubt about that. They're not going to meet their demand with the way their supply is constrained, and with the average age of an anesthesiologist being like 54 or 55 years of age currently. So the market is going to start adapting. The number of CRNAs is skyrocketing. 2025, we just got the numbers from the COA. First year ever, we graduated over 3,000 CRNAs. Next year is going to be more. The following year is going to be more. We may talk about the loan issues before we run out of time if I stop rambling on this topic. But however, The market is going to look different 5 years from now than it does today from a provider workforce standpoint. And in 10 years, it's going to look drastically different as well, is my prediction.
Randy, you want to close this one out? I mean, I know your position on AA policy is very pragmatic, and I don't want to at all mischaracterize by disagreeing with you there. But do you want to close out just on this workforce topic?
There are real structural changes going on in the anesthesia workforce that actually it predated COVID. COVID was an accelerant, and we're seeing them play out. You're seeing, on the physician side, Tracy's 100% correct. The challenge with the physician residencies, and we do need to grow the number of graduates, physician graduates from anesthesia residencies, but the challenge is it's so damn hard from a structural perspective to do that. Where on the CRNA side, and I'd say arguably on the AA side, there's much more flexibility and there's much more capacity growth in the system. So yes, I think with that, and I'm surprised that the physician part of the community is not expressing more concern about their pipeline. I look at the data just like everyone else, not everyone's, but the nerds who are interested in workforce related stuff. And I don't see how the pipeline on the physician side is going to keep up with the workforce exits and the increase in demand for anesthesia services. Whereas the CRNA side, you're seeing like material and impressive growth in those programs. And that's going to be, just because this is a little bit of a numerator denominator problem. Because we talk about AAs and we talk about CRNAs and we talk about anesthesiologists. To be clear, CRNAs are the backbone of anesthesia care delivery in this country. There's 70,000, and we're graduating 3,225. We're going to graduate 35 or 3,600. The programs are going to continue to expand. So you're going to see more and more CRNAs. I hate to use a business word, but market share, larger percentage of the overall market share, and that is, the way it's going to be. And, AAs are going to fill a role they have for, since the 1960s or whenever they were created. But I don't see them as a real threat to CRNA workforce expansion because the demand is so significant and the pipeline dynamics are so obvious to me that CRNAs are going to continue to be highly demand. And that's the pragmatic, I guess, approach I think about.
Yeah, for sure. It won't be the last time we talk about policy and how it trickles out. We're going to flip to our last segment here, and this is just ruminations. And here, folks, we're just talking about something we're thinking about a lot. I'll go first because mine will be brief. Something I think about a lot right now is broad misunderstanding. I see things on social media. Once a day I check in, and the things I see on the internet are so grossly wrong. I saw somebody talking about how a recruiter makes $40,000 per head, net income, right? Not the fee, like the individual recruiter. And I'm like, no, no, no. Anyone who knows anything. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot. Tracy, I'm gonna flip to you, and I know we're time constrained, and then we'll come to Randy.
Oh man, misinformation. That was a good one. I wish I had thought of that one, but no, for me, hot topic right now is student loans for anesthesia for nurse anesthetists. I think it's top of mind just because yesterday, which was on the 21st of May, a lawsuit got announced from AACN, AANP. It's being supported by Democracy Forward to sue the Department of Education. 25 state attorney generals have issued lawsuits against the Department of Education, really all around the misclassification of nursing as professionals. So for me, that's top of mind. The cures there's a lot of them out there to how we fix this, right? Lawsuits, legal avenues are one, legislative avenues, understanding the loan markets and gaps in those areas, understanding why CRNA residents are not getting paid, but physician residents are getting paid. How do we close that gap? That's something that, we always think GME has always existed since the beginning of time, right? Adam and Eve was here, and then physician residents automatically all of a sudden started getting paid for their services, but not CRNA nurse anesthesia residents. And I think when we think back to someone created that GME funding, why aren't we creating funding for our nurse anesthesia residents? They're working full-time hours, right? They're not able to hold down any other work or jobs. So anyway, there's a lot of cures out there for that. And that's just been top of mind for me in the past several days.
Go ahead, Randy. Let's close this out. What are you thinking about this week?
Yeah, this is a kind of a weird one, but I've been thinking a lot about this concept of growth versus product. So let me beat up on some large anesthesia companies for a second. So there is a hyperfixation of growth in, I would say, most, if not all, of the medium and large size anesthesia companies in the United
The whole
States,
economy, yeah.
which is understandable. And it's if you're not growing, you're dying. So I totally understand the importance of growth. But if you look at like why some of these, I would say many of these larger anesthesia companies have really struggled financially, from a brand perspective, losing contracts, and it's because they've been focused on growth but not focused on the product. And in my mind, product is you got great culture, you got great client relationships, your revenue cycle's tight, you're operationally very good, and being hyperfixated on growth, but not understanding and hyperfixated on the product that you're providing, I think is a failure of leadership. And if you look at these groups, I think their CEOs are not focused to the degree they should be on, hey, are we doing a good job with our clients and with our clinicians? And that's why I have very little to no sympathy for them when they, in terms of their contract loss and their reputation hits that you see. And it's because it's their fault. You have to be focused on both growth and product.
I would sum that up, Randy, in one succinct sentence. They're taking a short-term view.
Yes.
Instead of a long-term view. Because the short-term, like growth, it's good, it feels good, dopamine kick. Theoretically, it increases their valuation, right? It makes them more valuable for someone to acquire them. But they're missing the long-term view of providing the good product, the high level of services, maintaining those relationships. That, to me, is more valuable or equally as valuable to growth, right? The long term versus the short term. That's the way I'd look at it.
I love it. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. What I love about these episodes is I feel like I actually get to talk to you guys, and it's fun and engaging, and it's just thank you both for being on. So those of you who are listening, thank you for listening to this episode. There's a lot of ways to reach us. You can follow our social media channels on Instagram and TikTok. I post there as well. We have a website, abouttherest.com. You can email us if you want to use the technology born in the 80s. You can email us, social@abouttherest.com. And thank you for those who are commenting. We're also on YouTube as well. All the full episodes go up to YouTube directly. I'm your host, Joe Rodriguez. Thank you for our guests today who showed up today, Tracy and Randy. Our executive producers are me, our Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brook. Our editor and engineer is Jason Portizo. The music that you hear at the start of the episode and at the end of the episode is Omer Benzvi. To learn about our About the Rest's program and disclaimer ethics policy, they make me read these, folks. Submission and verification licensing terms and HIPAA release terms, you can go to abouttherest.com or to reach out to us at production@abouttherest.com with any questions, concerns, or fun medical puns. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great week.